Burkina Faso, a landlocked nation in West Africa, has been experiencing a surge in national and economic growth and also implementing key reforms. Now, however, this progress seems to be a paradox of progress where economic gains are being overshadowed by escalating insecurity. So what's behind Burkina Faso's economic growth, and can it be sustained amidst the escalating security challenges? This is The Conversation. I'm Darshan Usman. Let's talk. Burkina Faso has introduced a prison reform allowing prisoners and pre-trial detainees to work in agriculture, reducing their sentences. Now, for every month of labor, 3 months are deducted from their sentence. This reform prioritizes rehabilitation over punishment, aiming to facilitate reintegration into society. Now, the reform is part of a broader initiative promoting restorative justice and agricultural development. By integrating labor into the penal process, the government aims to rehabilitate offenders and contribute to the country's agricultural productivity. This approach, according to so many people, reflects a shift towards more humane and culturally relevant justice systems, moving away from colonial-era punitive methods. Now, joining me to break it down, we have Dr. Sam Amadi, Director, Abuja School of Social and Political Thought in Abuja, who will be joining us later. But for now, we have Ejike Okpa. He's a Global Affairs Analyst in the USA. Thank you so much for joining us on The Conversation, Ejike.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right, so let's begin with the prison reform in Burkina Faso. So many people have actually called this forward thinking. How does this approach compare with historical prison labor models, like the other ones that are obtainable around the world, like the 19th century urban system in the US, where labor was seen as a means of discipline rather than rehabilitation?
Well, excuse me. If you go back to the African situation, Africans didn't build prisons. There was no reformation of people who have committed crime. Usually back then, they just chased them out of the village, tell them get away. It wasn't until the British people, the colonial people came, that was a formalized prison, built. And then if you go back, even the prison over there in the Eleme side of River State, they had prisons that were working farms. In Enugu, my grandfather was one of the early contractors that built Enugu prison. The prisoners were used to do some sort of, work. In Texas, the Texas Department of Corrections, for the low-risk prisoners, they're the ones that make our license plate. The license plate we use, they're the ones that do the traffic signs. And, they do some other stuff, but they don't, sometimes they have them cleaning the highway. But these are low risk, prisoners, people who are not hard criminals, people who probably, they don't call it the community hours. You do this community service and you get a credit for time, which counts towards the physical time you spend behind bars. So what Burkina Faso is doing is welcome, because now what you do is you're tapping into, labor, which after they do their time, they can come out and become useful citizens. And then you're also going to enhance some productivity, whether you pay them while they're in prison is something else. But if you just to give them credit for time because of what they're doing other than just being locked up, that's a welcome development.
Okay. Now, have similar programs, do you have an idea if similar programs, in the past have been used primarily as punishment or as tools for rehabilitation and reintegration, especially in Burkina Faso?
Punishment is fine, but again, if you are dealing with, hard criminals, murderers, people who have done some things, do you want to turn them loose who may commit another crime? But if it's this, minor offenders who maybe, out of hunger or something, stole something from the market or committed some what I consider minor offenses. Yeah, you rehabilitate them, and then you also give them opportunity to learn something. Some of it's not just agriculture. They can be welders, they can be carpenters, they can be something so that when they come out, they come back into society and become useful to themselves and then useful to their community.
All right, now, still on this, with 1 month of labor, reducing a sentence by 3 months, what are the projected economic benefits for the agricultural sector in Burkina Faso? And how do you think that these figures would compare to, similar initiatives in other nations? I know Cameroon has something similar, Ghana has something similar, even the US has something similar.
Well, 1 month, 1 month of what is it called, of participating in this program, and then you get 3 months, benefit on the time. So you look at it, do they have like a minimum? If somebody is locked up for 1 year, and then so that means you get 1 month and 3 months come to your year. Do you after that you get released, or how many hours are they going to work in a day? Are they going to do 8 hours, 10 hours? All those things. I don't know whether they have worked it out. But again, here in the U.S., we oftentimes have people released for they say good conduct, or for having done. Some people even teach others while they are in prison, and then that counts towards reducing their time. So every prison system has their own differences, and that differences count towards physical time. In the U.S., if you are doing a federal prison, they do it calendar time. That is, if you get 1 year, you get actual 1 year. But in state prison, 1 year doesn't really mean calendar year. It could be 7 months, it could be 6 months because of other things. So these are things, again, that each individual jurisdiction will have to get in and discuss how that time is counted for. But it's also a benefit to the society. You don't want to lock up people, for so long, and then they come out, they get more angry, because this is supposed to reform. The punishment, they have gotten it, but it's supposed to be a process of reforming somebody so that when they come back into society, they are, new and improved. They will appreciate freedom, because, one thing you don't want, the greatest punishment to individuals is to make them lose their liberty and freedom.
All right.
So,
okay. Well, when we come back in time, we'll talk about, you talked about reformation and also how you don't want to overwork the prisoners so much that they end up getting angry and all that. We will discuss that, when we come back. But then I'm being told that Sam Amadi has actually joined us. Thank you so much for joining us on the program, sir. Dr. Sam Amadi, can you hear me?
Thank you very much.
Oh, yeah, I can hear you now.
I can hear you. Thank you.
All right. So now you've heard what Mr. Okpa has actually said. Let's have your thoughts on the prison reform that Burkina Faso is actually working on right now. That's spending a month on agriculture, that's going to the farms for a month to shave off the 3 months from your sentence.
Well, I think it conjures up the concept of traditional justice system. Again, jurisprudence scholars tell you that the reason for having penal sentences in terms of imprisonment or other forms of punishment, basically deterrence. Some talk about deterrence theory, which is okay. You have to give such punishments that are likely to forestall or prevent in 2 ways. If you incarcerate a criminal, they will not have opportunity to commit further crime. Again, deterrence in general sense that the fear of imprisonment constitutes a general deterrence for the population. Then you have the idea of reformatory theory, that essentially prison is supposed to reform. And again, people talk about due process and justice in terms of the fact that you have to have prison terms that align with crimes and, of course, measure enough crime as a form of not just deterrence, but as people getting what they deserve, getting what their conduct deserve. But again, the restorative justice movement looks at penal theory as largely a way to restore in two dimensions. One, the criminal and the community. And so the African justice system, some people think, looks for a way to not just to punish the criminal, but to reform and restore the harmony broken. Now, the way I look at this is that if oftentimes the prison complex means that we are imprisoning too many people. Some people probably for minor offenses. Some people probably they will benefit by a teachable moment. The crime and the punishment could constitute a teachable moment.
That skills development as well. Yeah.
And so this notion will be since we want to mobilize economic development, mobilize human capital into the agricultural sector, why not use these prisoners who may not be very dangerous criminals, who may be first offenders, and utilize them to do something. First, it creates a sense of commitment to the country. They are going to feed the people. They're going to be involved in an enterprise that is communal in nature and that signals the value of work. You see, one of the values of hard work proceeds from agrarian culture. Agriculture is one of those enterprises or industry that connect us to value system, because in planting, you plant, you wait, you nurture, you tend until the plant grows. So using them for that could be a way of reintroducing values to them and helping them with the idea of good citizenship. And again, perhaps after their prison time, they could find employment and things. So I think in a way, it serves three purposes. Maybe it can help to remove the cruelty of the penal conditions we see across the continent and globally. Two, it might be a way of providing cheap labor for agriculture. And thirdly, it might be a way to also reform and reintegrate the prisoner. He is not being let off. He's working, or he or she is working. He's doing some labor, but this labor is construct as to develop. In a sense, as long as it's well managed not to be a way of letting off some people who are dangerous criminals, as long as there's enough deterrence and also there's enough recompense, do that will help to make sure that those people who go through this process have a sense that they've been punished, albeit punished in a way that returns value to society.
All right, let's hear from Mr. Okpa. Mr. Okpa, you heard what Dr. Amadi said. He talked about how it will, convert to skills development, and also post-release employment. So I want to know if you feel the same way. There are likely specific agricultural skills that the inmates will gain afterwards. And can these skills translate into employment opportunities once they reintegrate into society?
Of course, yes. I mean, it does. Once again, you lost your liberty and your freedom. Now you've gotten some training, and then you come out. It is how the society absorbs you or what the opportunities are. Like I said in my earlier comment, it doesn't have to be agriculture. It could be training them in some other skills. Some of these people might have been even people that were well educated, and they maybe what in America we call the white collar crime. In America we have two categories of crime: the white collar and the blue collar. The white collar is like politicians who have stolen money, embezzled money, blah blah blah. Well educated. Some of them, in America, then we have two prisons where we call the club fed, where if you commit certain white collar crime, it's low security, you go stay over there, and then we have the maximum security, and then so anything that you can do to rehabilitate and then be able to now have this person get back into the free society is always a plus. Let me even address something that Mr. Amadi said. There's no global prison reform anything. Every country, every jurisdiction has their own specific ways. In America, when we have a federal crime, before you go in for the crime, there's what they call the sentencing guideline. So somebody comes in and prepares a sentencing, and there's a federal sentencing guideline that must be followed, and that is what gives you the time before the judge takes a look at it, and the judge can enhance it or can lower it. That does not apply in state courts. And then, most African courts don't have a grand jury system, or a jury system is always the judge, that decide your punishment. And if you go into that judicial process, they don't have sentencing guidelines. It's more, they just decide, okay, you do 10 years or 5 years or whatever. So that is just addresses it. But the main point here is that once somebody is locked up, do you want to have them come out of the system angry, or do you want to say, hey, I repentance, or they have taken responsibility for their crime, but now they are new and improved. They want to get back into society, and they want to, because some people, there's a family staying in Nigeria or in Africa, the shame with somebody in your family. But in America, it may not even be that. Because, Americans are used to going to prison, politicians have gone, governors have gone, doctors have gone. I mean, a whole lot of people have been locked up in America, and sometimes they come out and they become better people, and it's in their record. Remember, when they do this thing, it's part of their record. So again, it's a welcome development that this country is doing it, but what needs to happen is what are the guidelines? Who makes the decision, how much time they do and how much credit they get after they've done the time.
Okay. Now, let's come back to you, Dr. Amadi. Now, let's not also forget that, even prisoners have rights and, are protected by the Constitution, international instruments, and also legal frameworks. Now, how can Burkina Faso ensure that, this particular reform aligns with human rights standards, particularly in avoiding what some critics have actually called forced labor in other contexts? Dr. Amadi, can you unmute your mic?
Oh, thank you. Good question. I think the key point about the human rights of prisoners is that prison or imprisonment does not derogate from the human rights, apart from the rights to movement and maybe right to some limited rights that are associated with custodial, situations. So apart from that, they have a right to dignity, right to life, right to respect, and in some good jurisdictions, they also have right to even family visits and so on and so forth. So the notion of forced labor, even in Nigeria, under international human rights law, has been defined in many ways that labor, all those rights are usually exempted from validly declared judgment of court after due process trial. So yes, for example, we have a right to life, we have a right to movement, free movement and everything, but those rights are restricted, and rightly so, if you are under a valid court, conviction and sentence after due process trial. So in this case, that the penal sentence or the administration of justice says, we are going to, you're already a prisoner, but this is how we're going to deploy you, as long as it's reasonable and dignified labor. That's another issue. The protection against inhuman treatment has no limitations or cutback. What that means is that whether prisoner, for whatever reason, nobody can be subject to undignified, inhuman, and torturous treatment. So if the labor has to be dignified. I can imagine Nelson Mandela reporting where he was in prison, being asked to dig hole, fill with water, remove the water. Meaningless labor is torture. So first, it has to be dignified labor, it has to be reasonable labor. And so I can imagine if you take people to work at a farm or work in factory or work in industrial places in a reasonable hours and in reasonable conditions, then that will not constitute violation of the human rights. But if, for example, as is possible, being prisoners, they are exploited, sent to work long hours and work in very terrible, hazardous circumstances or environment, that could constitute another basis for strategic litigation by either interest group, by the prisoners themselves, or NGOs. So I think the bottom line here is that the prisoners are treated like prisoners with their human rights, apart from the rights that are constrained, deploys their skill in a way that, even if it's not the optimum what they would have done if they were free. I mean, some of them, like he said, could be well trained, could be professionals who are involved in some kind of crime and got sentenced. But then they may not be able to, they don't be sent to banking halls and work in the data platform where they would have done if they are free. But I think as long as they're being deployed in ways where they can add value, improve themselves, and have the dignity of labor, then it's a win-win, these prisoners. And again, also, if those sentence go with some subrogation, meaning as you have a 7 years tenure and working in the farm or working in the factory or industrial complex could mean that it's commuted to 3 years, that would be a win-win. So you use the labor well. The key thing here is that, look, there's a growing concern around the political economy of imprisonment. If you have large prison population and you're going to treat them every day, we're seeing improvement in the penal laws in terms of treating prisoners well. We've moved Nigeria, for example, from prison service to correctional service. That nomenclature change has implication for treatment, for cost, for public financing, in environment, upgrading their living condition. So if you're going to spend that public finance, some will argue you need level of going to be in so to say under custodial control in some reasonable way. So I look at economics, and I think perhaps it makes sense to begin to think about different ways we can achieve the purpose of punishment, which should not be to degrade, but a sense in which people have realized that the society has sanctioned their behavior, society has expressed disapproval, and they internalize a sense of deterrence. And in doing so, we also achieve a public finance and political economy end, which is that we don't want to be spending on prison management without some value. And so using them for agriculture, and by the way, why agriculture? Burkina Faso is essentially, has no industrial, it's not an industrialized country. And so most of its business will be agro and agro-based or agro-business. So you would expect a lot of industrial capability. So using agriculture, and it could be an entry point for some of these prisoners who, not many of them will possess high skills, not many of them. And so I see the political economic consideration, but at the same time, you have to balance the fact that we also want to have prisoners have a sense that they've been punished, that society has expressed sufficient outrage at their behavior, and somehow through their custodial experience, they have internalized the values that society wants to pass. As long as we achieve that, if you like, didactic purpose, and also achieve the purpose of public finance management, that's fine for me.
All right, now let's digress a bit to other key initiatives, in Burkina Faso, and I'm speaking with Mr. Okpa here. Now, we know Burkina Faso, under, the leadership of Captain Ibrahim Traoré, has emphasized moving away from colonial-era governance models, and there are actually quite a bit of governance reforms currently taking shape, besides just the prison reforms, right? Now, the junta also presents itself, as a champion of sovereignty. Yes, it does that. Sovereignty and also self-reliance. Now, can you go ahead and tell us, how this all, stands, how this stance has affected Burkina Faso's diplomatic relations, with other international countries?
Let me say something before I get to that question. If you look at Burkina Faso, the prison population is less than 9,000 people. And that's include people already locked up, and then people who are waiting, a trial or, pre-sentencing. So, as to how this would benefit whatever sector, agricultural or non-agricultural, you could see it may not even have any significant impact, because 8,000 people compared to the population, I think, is more than 25 or 30 million people. It's very, very low. I mean, in fact, it's even a credit to them that they don't have that many people being locked up. So when it comes to, what Burkina Faso is doing, whether they are, saying, okay, we're going to move away from a colonial era type of punishment and do the traditional, every country, by their sovereign right, has the right to do what is good for their country. And then what you get out on the international scene, what you want to do is you want to look at bilateral relationship and multilateral relationship. And those relationships, they have to be beneficial to you. It's a win-win. It shouldn't be a master servant. So whether you are in a constitutional democracy or in a monarchy or whatever, at the end of the day, it is what are the freedom? What are the things people that are defined within this geography are benefiting from their government? Democracy. If democracy is the panacea for economic development, many countries, India, which is the most populous democracy in the world, would have been ahead. But oftentimes it is not. It is based on what? The governance, the role. I mean, China is a communist country. China is running circles around India. So you look at democracy from the Indian perspective and that of the Chinese and see where the benefits are. So every country, again, no matter how small or big you are, you have to really zero in. The president or the prime minister or whomever is in charge of that government has to now say, what can I do to make people in my country or in that particular country have a sense of belonging and have a sense of ownership, because that is what's going to enable them defend anybody coming from outside. When you are invested in your country, then you have a sense of ownership, and then you are able to be patriotic or be nationalistic. Everybody has to do it. When you do that, then you see the benefit.
Absolutely. All right, well, thank you so much for your take. So we'll take a quick breather now. When we come back, we'll definitely continue this conversation. Please stay with us. Welcome back, and thank you for staying with us on the conversation. And we've been talking about Burkina Faso and the series of reforms that's actually ongoing in the country at the moment. And we still have Dr. Amadi and Mr. Okpa with us, speaking to us on this. Thank you so much for staying with us, gentlemen.
Thank you for.
All right, so let me.
Thank you.
Let me come to you, Dr. Amadi. Now, we're still talking about some other reforms, and we know that Burkina Faso's security crisis, has been something that has been talked about for a while now, considering recent military strategies that have been very, very aggressive, especially in tackling insurgency. Now, can you speak to us, because the junta has actually cut ties with France, and also sought new security partnerships with Russia and all that. Can you go ahead and speak to us on, the impact this is or will have, on the country or on the country's stability?
Well, I think that absolutely. I think Burkina Faso has come a long way. They've had a period like this before, when a credible and revolutionary leader was also Thomas Sankara was killed. Again, this change of policy has impacted political consciousness in Burkina Faso. Citizens are now enlightened. They seem to be the region now is a very unusual support from the people, and they've taken issues from France. Again, France had a problem in French West Africa in terms of the political development, some of the economy, issues around.
Hello, Dr. Abadi. All right, well, we seem to have lost him. We'll try to reconnect with him. Now let's hear from Mr. Okpa on the, security architecture in Burkina Faso and the fact that, they've cut ties with the French, and they're in partnership with Russia, and the fact that we know that Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger have left ECOWAS, and they formed an alliance. That's the AES alliance. So go ahead and speak to us on the impact that it will have on the Sahel and also Burkina Faso stability.
When you look at public safety, you always go back to the budget. If you look at most West African countries, sub-Saharan African countries, you see that the budget for public safety is always very small. The police is not equipped. You have and then that is where you now have the military, like, the video that has been looping while we're talking. It shows the military people. It gives you that sense of, Gestapo, siege. A country that is on the progress or, moving forward and needs to have their police. The military people are supposed to be in the barracks. Go to Nigeria, for instance, and then look at the MPF budget. The Nigerian police force has less than $1 billion in budget. And so when you look at Burkina Faso, you might think, public safety, their police probably don't even, is practically non-existent. They don't have any tools. They don't have nothing to help them do the work. Then it comes to the relationship they build. What I found very unfortunate with the African countries, they always think, I'm going to partner with Russia. If France doesn't help me, or America doesn't help me, or China does. You don't have to go to those people. You have to internalize your own success stories, and you have to look at yourself and say, what works for us, or is going to work with us? Going to what is Russia going to do to you? I mean, look at all the countries where Russia has been. What is the success story? Or you look at China, they come in with inferior stuff and they try to bribe you and stick you with agreements that oftentimes choke you. Don't you have educated people that can look at those things and say, no, we're not going to do it? Part of being very successful in life is for you to say no and not to take anything that is put in front of you. And that's what has crippled the African nations. Excuse my expression here, it's like a cheap prostitute that has no minimum standards. Whomever shows up with something, like they say in Nigeria, money for hand, bag for ground. You have to resist those temptations. You have to stand up on your own and begin to build your nation. Every country is beautiful by natural resources they have. How you use those natural resources or leverage them or pledge them is what really matters. But when you don't do that, and when you think somebody's going to come in with money because they have devalued your currencies, remember, it's the currency devaluation that has put the African countries on a catching the wind kind of situation, and they will never catch up. When I left Nigeria for America, you know how much I paid for my ticket? It was 768 naira 50 kobo. 37 years after, 768 naira 50 kobo will not buy you a bottle of beer. But that's what bought my ticket to fly from Nigeria to England and then to USA. Yeah. So you keep looking at, you have minerals, you have this, you have that. Every country is endowed. Anywhere God left life, they left people something there to survive us. If people can survive in Alaska, in the tundra, why are Africans that have 24/7 sun that can grow anything on the solar, running all over the world, looking for Russia, looking for America, looking for France, and looking for China. So again, you come back to that sacrifice. How does the president or the prime minister, how do you speak with your people? How do you talk to them? Or do you talk at them? At the end of the day, it's not the people serving the president, it's the president serving the people. So Africans need to rethink and reorient their mind, because the money they are asking other countries to give to them, God did not wire it to them. The currency is a human creation. Leverage your own and make your own work. And if anybody steps in to try to devalue it, say no. You're not going to. And then you stand up to it. Make the sacrifice. I mean, back again when I left Nigeria, I had naira. The excess naira I had to America. When I came to America, I went to a bank and they were able to convert it to the dollar for me to open an account. Today, if you show up with naira in most American banks, they will probably think, what is that? It's because the Nigerian leadership, again, similar to most African leadership, have crushed their own economy by letting their currency go to nuts, not having value, not having purchasing power. You can reverse those things by policies, by having physical and monetary policies that make sense for your own country. You don't care what is going on to your neighbor. You know, like when
Mr. Okpa, now talking about, you know, having initiatives that would actually make sense and, you know, move your country forward, we're not forgetting the fact that, you know, Burkina Faso has nearly, even with all the reforms that's happening now, they have nearly 2 million internally displaced people due to conflict. Now, how can the government, you know, balance both? That's making sure that the reform actually works for these people, including those who are internally displaced, and also addressing the ongoing humanitarian crisis.
Well, okay, internally displaced, what caused the displacement? Was it a civil war? Was it a natural disaster? Was it what caused it? And then you sit back and say, how do you resettle them? Are you going to resettle them by giving them a new place in the country to go to, or are you going to resettle them back to their own country? All of those things are where the policies and programs come to play, and then you begin to see what works. But you're not going to achieve success with that by running to UN Center for Human Settlement or World, whatever, they confuse you. You take the responsibility for your own country. And I want to make this statement, and then I can go, you know, keep quiet for me. You know, when Kwame Nkrumah became the first president of West African country in 1957, you know, what was he doing? He never secured the plate. He was after the pen. He was so Pan-Africanism, but he never secured Ghana. He never made Ghana the envy of his neighboring countries. And that's why he was toppled, because none of these people focus on their country. They always want to, you know, what is Africa? 54 African countries. Obviously, you don't even have anything in common with somebody in Egypt or in Kenya or this. Focus on your country and at best in your region. Make a success out of what you're doing so you can create jealousy and then even attract people to come and invest. But you start doing this Pan-Africanism, running all over the place and not focusing on your country, you're going to lose it. I always say secure the plate before you go for the pen.
Okay. Now, Dr. Sam, are you back? Hello, Dr. Sam Amadi.
Yes, I'm back.
All right. Thank you for reconnecting with us.
Yeah.
All right. I'm sure you heard what Mr. Okpa actually said, you know, talking about how, you know, these reforms would actually impact, especially the internally displaced people. And we also know that, you know, he talked about how Africa, instead of running around, or countries in Africa, instead of running around, should focus on building and developing their countries. Now, the junta has actually criticized Western-led aid programs, you know, and also promoted self-sufficiency. Would you say that this has been or will be an effective approach, especially when it comes to tackling poverty and food security in Burkina Faso, which is, you know, one of the poorest countries in Africa?
Well, I think you have to be very smart here. I mean, I agree with him, but I also don't agree with everything. Look, you can't keep an eye on geopolitics. Japan said economic from and it happened. They were smart. The 1960s had the U.S. support. So agree, you have to be domestic, national economy. But in today's globalized world, how you relate with global powers will shape the opportunities, not just resources. Poverty is trade. Now, making trade fair, having access to markets. Burkina Faso is small. So Burkina Faso has no capability of economic growth. This is my area of expertise. Economic growth without markets. So yes, I agree that it shouldn't be, you know, ideological all over the map, you know. But at the same time, you have to smartly think about how do you create a relationship with global powers that enable you to grow secretly without disruption. Let's not forget that even Nkrumah became a victim of CIA, of the fight between KGB, CIA, Russia, and the US. And so, whereas it's important to focus at home, and all countries Some have resources that they can grow. They also have to understand how the world market is shaping. They also have to leverage in and leverage out. So what I find is that the Burkina Faso should not be too ideological and too radical, or go out fighting or embracing China, Russia in an age where the American government may not like that, or China. So pragmatism requires that you try to be on the good book of as many as you can, but at the same time creating a buffer around you to utilize your own resources without disruption. Global politics, global economy is all about disruptions. It's all about smart moves and smart alliance. Now, back to the issues around their poverty. They don't have too many options. Look, if you watch from 2020, Burkina Faso and these other three countries, Niger, even Guinea, Mali, or conflicts. One of the crises of economic development in Africa is crisis, and those crises are also products of the functionality in statecraft, in the way the countries were put together. The issues around ethnic conflicts, around who gets to power, poverty itself creates a tendency for poverty, for conflict, access to resources. Those who are looking at natural resources as an invitation to disrupt those countries. So yes, the leaders should own responsibility, but they need smart thinking. And the first thing they have to do is to make sure that they do not confront power, but in a way to have capacity for export from agro to manufacturing. And that's
Hello, Dr. Sam. Dr. Amadi?
I think he's having communication challenges.
Yes.
Connection.
Yes, he obviously is. We'll try to reconnect with him, even though we still have a few moments to go. Now, let's come back to you, Mr. Okpa. Now, Mr. Okpa, what he talked about, he said he doesn't totally agree with you. And we know that reports have it that although the country, that's Burkina Faso, still faces challenges related to security concerns and a fragile business environment, are there financial and institutional sustainability prospects of some of the initiatives that the government is actually reeling out, especially the prison reform?
All of this is, like I said, all of the above listed below. Again, it goes back to what I consider leadership, the governance. What is this country trying to achieve? Every country has challenges, and those challenges usually can be socio-economic and it could be political. But the thing is, what reforms, what programs and projects, what discussion, what laws are you bringing in place? There's always going to be somebody who wants to come into your country to destroy you, distract you. But the point is, the people that are part of your country, that is the people you are their president or their, are you sharing that information with them, telling, hey, this is what's going on. We have to believe in ourselves, or you just keep quiet and try to cut a deal, and then when things go bad, and then, it's like, oh, Russia came in, France came in, da, 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 da. That has been the excuse of the black race. You go to Haiti, you go to Jamaica, every time they say, oh, the superpowers don't want us to. That is a lie. That is a lie. Small countries, look at Sweden. Sweden is 11 million people, and the economy is bigger than that of Nigeria, Ghana, or anywhere. So, and then you have Burkina Faso that is almost 20 million people. Let me ask you, if the economy of countries are to be decided on who can drink a can of Coke on a daily basis, Nigeria is 200 million people. England is 55 million people. And they said, okay, just drink Coke and eat some burger for the day. Why would the economy of England or Sweden be bigger than that of Nigeria. Economy is about the people. What goods and services can you deliver to them? What is the purchasing power of the local economy? You know, before you start to export, can you even satisfy your own people domestically? Why are you exporting when your people are hungry? That's what they sold Nigeria in Africa in the 80s, called the structural adjustment program. Become an export-oriented economy when you have not even satisfied your domestic stuff. And then you still have people who have PhD or whatever running around. They haven't been able to engage and say, no, we cannot export until we feed ourselves. And we're going to make our currency, strengthen our currency so that it gives our people the purchasing power so that they can pay their bills, live in their home and go to school without having to depend, on euro, the dollar, or the pound. I mean, these things are what they taught you in school. So how is it that after the African has gotten their PhD, they go home and they cannot even implement anything? So again, it doesn't matter. Every country has challenge. In America, we have homeless people.
Of course.
They are in the millions, but people still come to America and look for solutions. So in Nigeria, the people you call displaced in America, we call them homeless people. But is America running around and going to UN and World Bank and everybody say, oh, help us? No, they're dealing with it with their own policies. But a little thing in Africa, everybody's jumping over. Let me even tell you, it took the President of America 106 years from 1776 to 19-something before they left America to go to another country. You know where they went? Panama. So for more than a century, America was focused on itself. It was, if not for the World War that started, the first one and the second one, America was not going to go anywhere. But as soon as an African president becomes elected or appointed or selected, they're jumping all over the place. They haven't engaged their people, just like Tinubu is doing. How many times has Tinubu gone around in Nigeria speaking with the Nigerians, saying, what can we do? Or what do you want me to do? He's all over the place, speaking and attending even child naming ceremonies. That's not what your president's supposed to do. Sit at home and engage your population. If every Nigerian is able to feed himself with what Nigerians produce, that's what's going to make the Naira begin to gain against these currencies that they are chasing. Because you have 200 million people. So if again, look at, they're going to need water, they're going to need food, they're going to need, how much of that can you produce locally? Or if somebody is going to export it to your country, are they going to consider your country a dumping ground? Or they're going to see you as a partner where they sell you something, you sell them something. That's it. The economy is not a very complicated thing to do, but you have to believe in your own ability to solve your own problem and not look to somebody because they're coming from the West or the East to solve your problem. They don't have long-term interest in the success of your country. The people that have the long-term interest are the natives. The people who are going to stay there when this so-called World Bank, IMF, and who's experts come and leave. Okay, since Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala became Secretary of the World Trade Organization, how much trade is Africa doing with the world? But everybody was jumping up and down, Ngozi is blah, blah, blah. How much trade has Nigeria done since Ngozi got over that? So those things don't really matter. What matters is your domestic policy and how you respond with your people and address their needs. And those things are solvable. You don't have to go anywhere to solve it. When people want to create a partnership with you, either bilateral or multilateral, first of all, in the back of your mind, it has to be beneficial to my country. If not, say no.
Absolutely, Mr. Okpa. Now, let's hear from Dr. Sam Amadi. Dr. Amadi, can you quickly wrap up? I think we just have like a minute to go. Let's have your final thoughts.
Okay, so I agree with him totally about staying at home and working, because I believe in national economy. But the point I wanted to make to add to you is simple. If you look at Deng in 1978, who changed China today, Deng went to Paris, went to Russia, went to US to learn how did the West grow. So the point is, you don't grow through isolation, but you have to to basically mind that. I agree with him totally that but the point I'm trying to make is that you have to keep an eye on comparative advantage and keep an eye on the global economy, and therefore ask yourself, how will Burkina Faso exit poverty? What are those opportunities? Which of those leading or middle income economies can we displace? What products? And then you have to maintain in the minimum good global relationship. That's the point I'm making. You don't have to junkette all over the world, but you have to keep an eye on global political economy. They have to mobilize their resources internally. Yes, it's true. Our leaders are junketed. The real problem is not even junketed. The real problem is that they don't understand that the global economy is an economy of competitiveness. There's no global economy. It's not by believing that others will develop you as a leading scholar. By the way, the U.S., the first Treasury Secretary, Hamilton, said so. He said that you grow by tariff. America was given about 50% tariff. Why? America had a large market, large population, and they used tariff to grow. Today, the World Bank says you shouldn't do industrial policy, don't do tariffs. But that's how America grew. Like Frederick Lee says, when they grow, they remove the ladder. The ladder every country is to grow is to outcompete your neighbor. It's a global economy. It must be able to put, and to do that, you have to optimize and mobilize the internal resources. So I agree totally with him, but I'm saying if you're a leader in the 21st century, you better learn a lot more about global politics, but it will shape whether you can even grow anything, whether you can produce. You have to be very smart.
All right, Dr. Sam. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Sam, for your thoughts on this. That was Dr. Sam Amadi, Director School, that's Abuja School of Social and Political Thought. And we also had Ejike Okpa, he's a Global Affairs Analyst in the U.S. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for taking time out of your busy schedule to speak to us on this.
Thank you. It's an interesting conversation, and I hope we have more of this.
Yes, we will, definitely. Thank you, sir.
Bye.
And with that, we've come to the end of the conversation. Thank you so much for staying tuned. Until next time, I remain Darshan Usman. Have a wonderful evening.